and welcome to the Legal Eagle. My guest of the show this week has been Advocate General of Maharashtra under 3 different Chief Ministers. He's also been the youngest Advocate General. He's also been the longest serving Advocate General other than H.M. Sirvai. I welcome on the show one of Bombay's most prominent lawyers, one of the most brilliant, most nuanced lawyers that we've seen, Senior Advocate Mr. Ravi Kadam. Sir, as I welcome you on the show, I want to start at the very beginning, at your early years. Did you always want to join law? And also your father, he was a barrister. He was the first additional government pleader at that time in Maharashtra, in the Bombay High Court. How did that time pan out? How did you take up law first?
Law was always there at the back of my mind. My father was a lawyer, and I had an elder brother who was to be a lawyer. Unfortunately, both my father and my brother passed away when I was still an undergraduate in Sydenham College. And then I decided that since I would become a lawyer, although still then my thought was that I'd either become a journalist or try for the IFS or the IAS. I had no fixed notions, but I was certain that I didn't want to be a chartered accountant or do MBA. I knew what I didn't want to do. I was clear on that. And law then kind of became the fallback option because there was a lot of history. Both my father had been a lawyer. And as a kid, I used to read a lot of my father's briefs as stories because he had, as he was a government pleader initially on the appellate side in criminal matters. So there used to be these large bound criminal volumes of criminal appeals from districts. And those were in print, like books. And if you read the judgment and you read the evidence, it was like reading a story. So that got me interested. And of course, then, as I said, accidentally, then I thought that this is the best fallback option. And I became a lawyer.
Did you also want to do journalism, which is something I thought was an option that you wanted to take up, sir?
Yes, I was very keen because even when I was in college, mostly undergrad college in Sydenham College, I used to write a bit in the college magazine, in college journals. We used to have a wallpaper on the wall in the college on which I used to write humorous pieces every week on, what happened in college. I also used to be a compere at the college annual day for, in those days, I don't know now how colleges go, but used to have this fish ponds regarding professors and teachers. So I used to be the one who had the responsibility of calling out the professors and, doing all that. So I had an inclination towards writing and journalism. But after some time, I realized, that it would be better to do law.
In 1981, you topped Government Law College. It was also a time where you've spoken very fondly about your professors. What were those impactful years like? You joined the bar in 1982, but before that, you topped the university in 1981. What were those years like?
Government Law College, maybe even in later years, was a college which had 2 sets of professors. And the professors we looked forward to were the professional lawyers who were just doing it out of passion and to give back to the profession. And those were the teachers whose classes were often or almost always full. And then there were the professional, who were teachers by profession, and people would try to bunk their classes, and you know how it is in college. We had a professor called Professor Tempton Daruwala, and who taught us drafting, pleading, conveyancing. One of the subjects was drafting of pleadings and conveyances. And he was such a brilliant teacher that, he had a spellbound, and he inculcated, I think, in every student who came in his class, a love for the law, apart from, the subject that he taught. And he would tell us stories about cases that happened in court. And he was a very, very colorful, funny, very erudite at the same time character. Then we had another professor called Professor Pithawala, who also taught in a very nice way that, you could really understand complex concepts from him in a simple way and in a short time. But the most lasting impression I have of law college is of Professor Daruwala, who ran a law firm which specialized in IP work, who did trademarks, patent, copyright, and all that.
Mr. Kadam, my question also, summer of 1982, you became a member of the bar. You joined the legendary chambers of J.I. Mehta. You met a lot of legendary talent there. There was Anand Desai, there was the Tulsapurkar brothers, there was Justice Dharma Tekari. What were those years like? Did your senior ever allow you to even go out, advocate, the matters? Did he allow you to counsel them? How were the notes prepared for the seniors? What were those years like?
Luckiest things that happened to me was that I joined the chambers of J.I. Mehta. J.I. Mehta was a formidable senior. He has a lion head, like silvery hair, and he was a lion in the court, and everyone used to be afraid of him in the court. And outside, he was the gentlest of souls, who hardly, he spoke so softly, you couldn't even get to strain to hear him. And his way of working, of course, when I joined him, he was already a very big name. So there was not much work that I could do with him. But I was fortunate that between him and me, there were seniors, people were senior to me, like the Tuldapurkar brothers, a couple of other people, Mr. Satish Gandhi, and Mr. Mehta's nephew, Mr. Girish Desai. So they were about 10, 15 years senior to me, except for Virag, who was just 5 or 6 years ahead of me. So their briefs I used to get. And the system in that chamber was unique. It was like a real, genuine joint family, where the briefs, in the old days, I don't know, maybe now also, the briefs were like folded briefs. Not the big flat files we used to have, which we have now, but the brief used to be a folded brief. And on the cover was the docket, and the back side was blank. So the system was, which most of the people followed, including Mr. Mehta, though he hardly made notes, he just remembered everything from memory. But system that was followed was that you write down on the back of the brief what the case is about and the points that you're going to argue. And because it was the busiest chamber in terms of commercial work, it was inevitable that in the lunch break, councils, the Tuldapurkar brothers particularly, they would find themselves too busy, and some court they would not be able to go to. So they would pass the brief to you at about 1 o'clock, 1:30, and tell you orally what the point was. And you had to read that note which they had made and go through the brief. And as I said, briefs were not so big, so you could read them in an hour's time or 45 minutes and all that. And you had to go and argue that at 2:45. So briefs were passed, like a joint family. If you couldn't do it, it was given to the next member to do. And the beauty of it was that at the end of the day, if you actually argued and worked out the brief, they would cancel out their name, because the brief used to have brief to so and so Mr. Tuldapurkar or Mr. Desai. They would cancel out their name and write my name and say, now you charge the fees and you recover the fees. So this was the best tutelage.
You spoke about your professors, to how you became one of the most successful IPR lawyers, a name to reckon with. It started with some of your early initial cases, the most impactful of the ones that I've read of, the Tiger Balm's case. Were those years exciting, nerve-wracking? Were you a struggling lawyer? Take us through those times, Mr. Kadam.
I started learning by getting pass-on briefs from the Tuldapurkar brothers, from Mr. Girish Desai, Mr. Satish Gandhi, who were my seniors in the chamber. And J.I. Mehta's chamber was known as an IP specialist chamber, amongst other things. Mr. Mehta was an absolute authority on IP. Now, Tiger Balm is a very interesting story, which I can take 2 minutes and tell you. When I was briefed with Mr. P. Chidambaram, and Tiger Balm was a Singapore company, and the name of the company was Haw Pa Brothers. There were two brothers who had started Tiger Balm. And due to import restrictions, there had been a massive trade built up in India of copying their product. The largest copier was in Tamil Nadu. So we filed a suit in Madras High Court. And it came before a single judge where Mr. Chidambaram led me. And because we had filed it after a lot of delay, etc., and the other side was a registered proprietor, we lost. And then we went in appeal. By the time we went in appeal, Mr. Chidambaram had become a minister, so he couldn't lead me. And there was another senior counsel called Mr. Pai, who was 75 years old on the day the matter started. And it was his 75th birthday, and we were before a division bench headed by Justice Srinivasan, who later became a Supreme Court judge and passed away as a sitting Supreme Court judge. On the first day, this my senior, Mr. Pai, who was a Vasanta Pai, his name was, his 75th birthday. So, and he was a giant, in Madras High Court. So he argued for about an hour or two, and then he told the judges, "It is my 75th birthday. Now I'm going. My junior will now continue with the case." And I was like about 7, 8 years in the profession arguing an appeal. And on the other side was G. Ramaswamy, who was at that time, he had just stepped down as the Attorney General of India. So I was opposing the former Attorney General, like a giant in the bar, and suddenly thrown into the deep. But as I said, I was lucky in this also because the Justice Srinivasan was very, very upright and very moral. And he thought that this Indian party having stolen the trademarks, just what I can surmise.
And also, I now want to ask you, Mr. Kadam, about your years as an Advocate General under three chief ministers. It's a rare feat. You've done it thrice. And also at the youngest at the age of 47, after which you've also been the longest serving for 7 years after H.M. Sirvai. What were your years as a law officer like?
Initially, it was very challenging because I'd never worked for the government before. So it's a kind of mindset change because when you're working on the private corporate matters, private sectors, briefed by solicitors, it's much easier because everybody is focused working. While working for the government, you learn on the job, and there is a lot which is a kind of unwritten subtext which you have to understand, which only while on the job you learn it. Nobody can teach you. Of course, I had the benefit of one of my predecessors, Mr. Vanvati, Ghulam Vanvati, who later became Solicitor General and then Attorney General of India. And I had the benefit of his guidance in very many matters. And one of the things he told me, and particularly I remember this about public interest litigations, he said, you'll get ambushed in court. He used a very funny phrase. So he said, you'll be ambushed in court, you'll be the Advocate General, you're expected to know everything. Your side and your the government and the secretaries and whoever they'll have briefed you. And suddenly your other side lawyer will pull out some document, something which will completely ambush you. So you learn to be cool and to handle even this. The initial years, of course, when 2005, 6, 7 was good. Then we had, in 2008, we had the terrorist attack in Bombay, and there was a spate of PILs, and we had to handle those. There were lots and lots of cases. One thing I felt was that because I was younger than most advocate generals, most lawyers who had been advocate generals, the expectation from me for doing more work in terms of output was always there. I was appearing in court like a regular counsel in 3-4 matters in Bombay. One day go to Nagpur, one day in a week, sometimes 1-2 days, 3 days a week, go to Aurangabad bench, because Bombay High Court is in, Maharashtra is in 3 benches are in Maharashtra. Goa, of course, is a separate state. So the expectation of work was very high from me.
Famous Alistair Pereira case when the 22-year-old had mounted down in the hit and run case at Carter Road. You appeared before the then Bombay High Court Chief Justice Swatantra Kumar's bench, and you had also at one time admitted there was police lapses in the investigation in that case. How did you at such times when there were such cases, whether the Alistair Pereira case or the Salman Khan case, how were you briefed? How were you able to manage such situations?
Salman Khan case, if I remember, was before me when Mr. Vanvati was the Advocate General. But Alistair Pereira happened when I was there. And what had happened was that the court had given him a very, very light sentence. and a lot of people had died under his, in the course of his rash or negligent driving. And the High Court Suomoto took it up, and Suomoto entertained an appeal even before the government could file an appeal. Eventually, government did file an appeal, but the High Court Suomoto started it, and Justice Swatantra Kumar was very keen, that a justice was done to the victims also, and that was, I think, behind his philosophy of picking up this case. And the criminal law relating to liability for the accidents or a driving in which somebody had killed was not very clear until that time. He felt that he needed to give it a new direction, which he did. The police investigation had been okay, but the reports which had been made, the forensic reports, the accident report, there's a vehicle inspector, those were bad. And Justice Swatantra Kumar had great knowledge of this subject, and he kind of brought out various aspects which we didn't know. Personally, I felt sorry for Alistair Pereira because he was a young boy, must have been 20 to 23 years old. And of course, justice had to be done, and he was an adult. But I personally felt that the law in that case operated rather harshly on him. And even when it went to the Supreme Court, though the High Court enhanced the sentence to 5 years, the Supreme Court felt that it should have been even more. So, which didn't happen because government did not file an appeal in the Supreme Court. And obviously, after 5 years, conviction was what remained.
Mr. Kadam, the Salman Khan trial, parts of it were happening in your tenure. Do you believe that the investigation was done correctly at that time? The police work was fine at that time?
I don't know if the investigation was not, was done wrongly. I don't think so. But I did feel that given the high profile of the case, it should have been decided expeditiously in the trial court. Because if you recollect, one of the key witnesses was the constable. He passed away during the course of the trial. And that was a factor eventually which probably weighed in his favor. I felt that if the investigation had been done more expeditiously, then at least the public, whether he's convicted or not convicted, that's a different thing. But the public would not have felt or got a sense of grievance against our system, meaning the legal system, that because of the slowness of the system, the delays, the benefit was given to the accused.
You have been offered to be a member of the bench, but you've politely declined. What's the reason for that, sir?
No, I was offered judgeship at a time when my practice had really picked up, and my family circumstances, I felt at that time, were not such that I could afford to be a judge. And if you don't become a judge at the right age, then the chances of progression in the judiciary, because it's all time scale related. So it's how early you become a judge determines how far you go. So I thought at that time I needed to, stabilize my family financially, etc. So I was asked by 2, 3 different chief justices, but I consciously did not do it.
Do you think there is a perceptible difference in the legal system?
I think it's a product of the times. I wouldn't, categorize lawyers differently. In the earlier days, I think things moved slowly in terms of, getting opportunities and things like that. And now it's much easier to get chances. You get paid far more than, what we were paid. I mean, of course, even if you account for inflation, still people are paid far more than what we were paid. We never expected to earn much money in the first 5, 7, 10 years, which is not the case now. Also, the lawyers today are much more competent than what we were. We came more from liberal thinking backgrounds, most lawyers, and we didn't look at it with any expectation. Now everyone comes with a definite agenda to be financially successful, to buy a house, buy a car, buy an office. we kind of, these things happened. We never looked for them. So you got things just fell in place. Now I guess the peer pressure everywhere else also is much more. So the bar is definitely different, but they're also quite hardworking. Only thing I find is that lawyers don't spend, young lawyers, I must say this, don't read, original textbooks so much. There's a tendency, which you might have also noticed amongst lawyers, to straight go to Manupatra, SCC online and start looking for cases. If you read textbooks and understand concepts, then you don't need any judgment. You can argue a case just on the basis of your knowledge of principles, which is something I find a little less, maybe because of time constraints. I don't blame them, or whatever, the expectations from clients, solicitor firms may be higher now. We had far more time to go through all the books and, develop knowledge, which is now a luxury possibly.
A remarkable step when it comes to protecting COVID-19, Mr. Kadam, has been taken by high courts across the country. The Nagpur bench of the Bombay High Court has given several instructions to the government to ensure there's oxygen supply, there is a capacity of beds. They've also said remdesivir should be available in several places. The Delhi High Court has said similar things. The Madhya Pradesh High Court has passed a brilliant order where they've given out details about how the government should go about it. The Allahabad High Court today has said that there should be some sort of a virtual lockdown in some of the major cities. I think it's the high courts that are leading the way when it comes to battling COVID-19. How do you look at the situation, which is unprecedented in India, and what would you think should possibly happen?
Any of these issues need to be handled by the government of the day in every state, because it is for the state governments to take the lead, to be more transparent, which many of them are being. What happens is that there is occasionally some gaps which need to be filled in, and which the state government, maybe for whatever reasons peculiar to that state, they are not able to do. Those gaps the court must fill in through its PIL mechanism. No longer can we say that let us divide the judiciary, the administration, hands off, no one should do this. We find that a proactive judiciary to fill in the gaps in the administration, or at least to bring it to the notice of the administration that this is where you need to be focusing, because everybody doesn't have all the wisdom, and our judges, with their experience of handling cases, administrative experience, etc., are certainly the right people to point the government in the right direction. And eventually it's for the government to do. But the court can't go beyond a particular limit, which I don't think it's doing. And I think the courts, by a nudge to the government or a push to the government in the right direction.
How is a given day in your life? How do you spend it? And when do you get time for your own personal hobbies, personal passions, and what are they?
No, court working days are busy because the whole day I start early in the morning and work at home, then go to office, go to chambers, then go to court, then come back to chambers. But weekends is where I have time, and now I spend my weekends in my home in Alibag, where I have a garden. So I kind of enjoy myself there. So what my passion is to be in Alibag on the weekends, look after my house, my garden, etc. I enjoy that. Those are my hobbies now.
On that note, Mr. Kadam, as we thank you for being with us on the Legal, I would like to say it was extremely enjoyable to hear very frank answers. I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.